Counselor Barrientos.
Yeah.
Counselor Blosser.
Here.
Counselor Fitzgerald.
Here.
Counselor Jantz. Counselor Schilling.
Here.
Counselor Shane.
Here.
Ivy.
Here.
Citizen members Adams.
Yes.
Brumfield.
Yes.
Cephas.
Here.
McMaster.
Here. Here.
Schuler. Spofford.
Here.
Williamson.
Here.
Citizen member Weston is excused and Council President Briggs is excused.
And just to be clear, we're doing the urban renewal budget meeting is what we opened.
Yes. So we need to call for nominations. Go ahead.
I nominate Holly Williamson for chair and Rich Spofford for vice chair.
Second.
Just as a point of order, nominations don't require a second, just so everybody knows.
Want to nominate anyone else? Okay. So we just take a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is that all I say? All right.
Train has moved.
What? Okay, so we got to approve the minutes from the May 13th, 2024 Dallas Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting.
To approve.
Second.
Okay,
Any discussion?
everyone, all in favor?
Aye.
Who's opposed? Oh, one. Okay, that passed. So now we'll turn the meeting over to Brian.
Excellent. So I will give the budget message for the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee. It's fairly short. There's not a ton to the urban renewal budget, but we do have some significant changes to just kind of talk about. So first and foremost being that the city is proposing, or city staff's proposing for the urban renewal budget to go to a 2-year budget cycle. Which means you're going to approve 2 years of authorizations and appropriations tonight instead of just the 1 year. We will have this meeting every other year instead of every year. And so as you go through the numbers tonight, you'll be able to see the 2025 through 2027 appropriation in the first column. And then if you go to the far right, we broke out the 2-year cycle into year 1 and year 2 for the appropriations in each of those years, both revenues and expenditures. So you'll be able to see that. But the Urban Renewal Agency has 2 districts. We have the downtown district, which was formed in the early 2000s, and then we have the South Dallas district, which was formed in 2022. Both of them are collecting taxes, and we have projects going on in both of those areas. They're both functioning well, and we continue to put a lot of work and effort into that. You will see a little increase in personnel services, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I can address that later on in the meeting, but overall, both are doing well. They're collecting taxes and accomplishing projects. So that's my message.
Okay. So I now declare this public hearing open at 6.
So before we do that, you have to
Okay,
ask for any public comments that are not
Okay.
related to the budget.
Okay, do we have any public comments not related to the budget?
Staff or budget committee members. Is there anyone online? Nobody online. All right, excellent. Now you can open the public hearing.
All right, now I declare this public hearing open at 6:04. This is a public hearing on the 2025 to 2027 Urban Renewal Agency biennial budget. Does the committee have any questions for the staff? Questions? Okay. Does anyone wish to comment at this time?
And no one in the room from the public. Anyone online? Excellent.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing at 6:05. And then we'll turn it back over to Brian.
Excellent. So I will turn your attention to page 96 on the budget document. This is the Downtown Urban Renewal Fund. We'll cover the downtown and then we'll cover the South Dallas, which is the second district. So in the Downtown Urban Renewal Fund, again, you'll see there's the 3 columns of numbers on the left. Those are the actuals for 2022-2023 fiscal year. fiscal year 23-24, and then the amended numbers for the current year that we're in, fiscal year 24-25. That's the 3 years of historical data, which is required to be provided with the number sheets. And then you'll have our proposed numbers there in the middle. Again, the proposed column is a 2-year aggregate for the funds. So you'll see our taxes, we're estimating over the 2-year biennium that we will have $495,000 in taxes broken out, 2 columns on the far right. This fiscal year coming up, $220,000, the following fiscal year, $275,000. And then delinquent taxes and every other line kind of follows that same pattern as you go down. A few things to highlight in here is that we are seeing a growth in our taxes, which is good. We want to see that in our urban renewal areas. When you get to personnel services on the expenses, you'll see that the numbers have grown and quite a bit. So our salaries and fringe used to pay or have been paying for just a fraction of our economic and community development director's salary. When looking at our general fund this year and noting that we're kind of feeling a little bit of a squeeze and a pinch there, we said, there are other employees that contribute to the work of urban renewal. We have an economic development specialist who puts time and effort into that program, doing a lot of work there. Our economic and community development director, I think, is getting 5% of his salary paid out of there. We up that a little bit with the percentage of time that he actually works on that work. I do a little bit of work, so I think like 3% of my salary is coming out of urban renewal as well. And then a little bit of our executive assistant salary for the economic and community development department. They put together the agendas and things like that. So a little bit of 4 employees' salaries are now being paid out of urban renewal. So that's why that number is higher than it has been in years past. The other lines that you'll see in here that have maybe changed a little bit more dramatically, professional services has dropped from $50,000 this last fiscal year down to $35,000 over the next 2 years. We just finished some larger professional services projects in the district downtown, and so we're expecting to spend less in the next few years. We're still budgeting for the building improvement grant program at $75,000 a year for the next 2 years. That's been a very successful program. We want to continue to see that be funded. There's also the minor improvement grant program, again, budgeted at the same amount it has been. That is also a popular program. We tend to spend most of that money in each year. And the Downtown Association has been a great partner to help generate the interest and activities for both of those grant programs. Capital outlay, we have some money appropriated in there. We'll see those numbers may adjust over the biennium depending on if we have projects that need to be completed. But we're budgeting, again, $20,000 in the project line and $100,000 in the property acquisition line. Transfers, we do have some debt that we're paying back. So there's a transfer to the general fund of $125,070 over the next 2 years. And then a transfer to the general fund interfund loan repayment. We're budgeting $89,151, and that's for the 791 Main Street project purchase. And we're not required to do reserves in our debt service. So that number, we budgeted $62,000 this last year. It's going to 0 because that's not a requirement. And then there's your operating contingencies at the bottom. Any questions with this number sheet?
One quick,
Yep.
capital outlay, do you have specific things in the pipeline, or is that just a general set aside?
It's kind of a set aside and a placeholder for projects that might come up over the next 2 years. Yeah. We are actively working on, in the downtown, the 791 Main Street project. So there might be some, ancillary project associated with that. Councilor Fitzgerald?
The debt service is zeroed out. Does that go down to the operating contingencies? Is that what that is?
So
That why
the-
that's so much bigger?
So the debt service reserve is zeroed out, and that's because we're not required to have that reserve anymore. We are still paying the debt back. You'll notice the transfers up above goes to some debt that the agency owes back to the city. And so that's where the debt service payments are being made there, is through a transfer. But the debt service reserve is being zeroed out because that's not required underneath our resolutions that we created to approve the debt in the first place.
I guess my question is, why are the operating contingencies so much larger in those 2 years?
Spending as much money as we have in years past, and so that will just grow over time as we spend less money. Which you want, because in the time that you have an urban renewal project that you want to infuse some cash into, it's nice to have a healthy contingency so that you can do that.
Nice to park the money until you need it.
Yep, exactly. All right, anything else on the downtown? All right, let's flip the page over to page 98. This is the South Dallas Urban Renewal Fund. So like the urban renewal, it's a 2-year budget. So again, you have your in the boxed area, the 2-year proposal number, and then on the far right columns is broken out between the 2 fiscal years. Again, taxes that we expect in the South Dallas, we're expecting $325 over the next 2 years, broken out to $150,000 and $175,000 each of the next 2 years. This district has been performing better than we hoped, which is awesome. And we're seeing some projects that are being built out right now in the South Dallas district. And that will just add additional revenue. Those are industrial projects, and so they get taxed at their real market value instead of their assessed value, which is awesome. So you get more revenue from that. And so that we're going to see and expect to see higher taxes from the South Dallas district than the downtown district, for example, or other places in the city. We're budgeting, kind of the key that I'd point out here is under the materials and services, your professional services at $250,000. We do expect to do some, planning work and some professional service work around the mill site, for example, or some other properties in the South Dallas industrial area. We don't necessarily know what those are, but we are expecting to do some kind of preliminary planning work in anticipation of some big projects down there in the future. So that's why that number is pretty large. Other than that, we're putting the rest of the money really in contingency. A little bit of staff money for staff time that is dedicated towards this district. Any questions on this fund? All right, if not, that's kind of the end of my report for urban renewal.
I have a quick question. So it being 2 years, is someone still going to be kind of monitoring this to make sure you're not running out of funds?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do a financial report every month
Okay.
that's shared with staff. So I kind of oversee that as the lead staff person with the budget, along with Cecilia, our finance director, and then each department will look at this. So Charlie Mitchell is our economic and community development director. He oversees this fund and this budget as well. So the three of us kind of have eyes on it each month. The city council also gets that financial report every month, and so they see that as well. And so with the biennial budget, I didn't talk about this in my message, I probably should have. My expectation is that we will, when we meet next year as a budget committee for the city budget, we'll give an update. It might just be a written update on kind of where this budget is doing, right? This is the first time doing a 2-year budget. I think it's going to be great, especially long-term. And ultimately, we're kind of using this urban renewal budget as a test run for see how a 2-year budget works with our financial software. It's a smaller budget. It's easier to iron out any kinks before we move the city budget to a 2-year budget process as well. So I would expect long-term, we'll do an urban renewal 2-year this year. We'll do an annual city budget, and then we'll do an annual city budget next year. And then the following year, we'll do a biennial budget for both the urban renewal and the city budget. And that way we'll have, one budget meeting where the committee gets together to authorize and approve the budget, the proposed budget. But I would expect the budget committee to get together every year. On the off year where you're not approving a budget, you'll just kind of do a check-in. Hey, how are we doing? Did we do good? Did we not do good? Did we have to make amendments? You wouldn't be responsible for making those amendments. The council has the authority to do that, but you could certainly, have an extra set of eyes on those numbers mid-budget cycle.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so if anyone doesn't have any other questions, I'm going to motion to approve the 2025-2027 Urban Renewal Agency biennial budget as presented by the Budget Committee and recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Board of Directors that they adopt the budget.
Second.
So moved.
She's not
I need
making
a
the
motion
She's
Oh,
asking for motion.
So moved.
I'm sorry, it sounded like you were.
It's okay. So,
You want to make the motion, David?
Well, she was reading it, so I mistakenly assumed.
I already
that
made it.
was real.
Michael made the motion.
Yeah, Michael did.
Michael
But now you need a
and
second.
David
Second.
second. Thank you. Okay, so is there any discussion on that? We don't have to discuss on that? So we're good? Oh, so then everybody vote. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Next, I am calling for a motion to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Board of Directors to levy the maximum amount of property taxes allowed under the law.
So move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Any further discussion? If not, I will adjourn the meeting, and we will start the next meeting. Okay. Okay. So I call the meeting of the City Budget Committee to order at 6:15, and she can note the attendance. It's good.
I did want to ask why the move to biennial versus annual?
So it'll be more important when the city budget goes to a biennial budget, because it's just a lot of work, right, that we put into creating a proposed budget and go through the process. If we can do that every other year and align it with an election of the council, then the council can be elected in November, set their goals in November, December, and then have a one budget that takes place every 2 years when an election takes place. So we're just trying to line up goal setting for the council with a budget that gets reviewed and approved by the committee, adopted by the council every 2 years, just for some efficiency. And that way, on the off year, the city can work towards those goals, 2-year goals that the councils create. So it's just some efficiencies built into a process that you don't have to do every year, but you can do every other year.
And it's probably obvious, but we do the same kind of oversight that we were talking about a moment ago with urban renewal, constantly being looked at, and lots of eyes on it.
All right, so we're going to call for nominations for the chair and vice chair.
To appoint Holly Williamson and Rich Spofford.
Second. We don't need it probably, but anyway.
Okay, so everyone needs to vote, right? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'll stay here. I need to move to approve the minutes from the May 13th, 2024 Budget Committee meeting and the April 21st, 2025 Budget Committee meeting training.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then we will turn the meeting over to Brian.
Thank you, Chair Williamson. So I'll deliver my budget message. It is in your packet of materials that you received, so I'm not going to read it, but I will highlight a few things. And I'll start just with some recognitions. First, thank all of you for being here. This is a time commitment. I know a lot of your work that you've already done this last week when you got your budget. In looking at it, a lot of you have asked questions, which has been great, and I've been able to answer some of those. We might go over some of those tonight as well. Feel free if I miss a question that you wanted asked tonight to make sure you ask that. But just thank my city staff as well. Just for an efficiency standpoint, they elected me to be here and lead this. No, they don't do that. But I tell them that I want to do it this way, and they agree with that. But a lot of work goes into the numbers here is done by them, not me. I just kind of shepherd and help oversee that. Special credit goes to Cecilia and her team. They put in a lot of work. Kim does a lot of work in assembling what you have here. So thank you to her and Emily as well to make sure the roll-ups, everything matches and is as it should be. So a lot of credit goes to all the staff behind me that put this document together. So that's great. And I couldn't do it without them. So we have a great team here in Dallas. There's a few things I want to highlight, just kind of high level in the city budget this year. So our enterprise funds and our special funds are doing pretty well. Our water fund is tightening up a little bit just because we have a lot of infrastructure projects that we're working on and are coming to fruition this year. And so you'll see that in the capital expense lines, and the contingency is dropping in that a little bit because we're doing some work, which is great. SDCs, we're being more conservative in our estimates for revenues this year, which is good. I think it's smart from a standpoint there. But each of those funds are really healthy, and we're going to be spending some money on those projects this year. Our general fund is continuing to kind of feel a squeeze, right? That's the message I put before you is kind of feeling the squeeze this year. And the squeeze is both positive and some challenges, right? There's opportunities and challenges. And the opportunities, the really good thing about feeling the squeeze from a personnel side is that we're having a fully staffed organization, which is awesome. Because I started here 6 years ago and then COVID happened and we weren't fully staffed. I'm looking at Todd Brumfeld, our former fire chief, and man, I remember he would come to meeting after meeting and just being like, we're barely making it by with the staffing that we have. And he remembers those days. And we've had a fully staffed fire and EMS department for 2 years, which is awesome. It's great. In fact, Todd built it to that, and then he left it in good hands. And so, so that's been great. Our police department, fully staffed. Chief Simpson's leaving that at a great time. He's retiring this year. And leaving it in the good hands of Jerry Mott, our current deputy chief. And so, but those two departments in particular are more expensive departments, right? They put their lives on the line and they deserve the compensation that they get, no doubt. But when you're fully staffed, it comes at a cost. And when you're fully staffed for a while, it comes at a higher cost because they move up a pay scale. And so instead of having maybe a strata of brand new employees and some more senior employees, when you have a tenured employees, it just is a little bit more costly. And that's okay. We actually prefer that when you can afford it because you have a staff that's competent and capable and they're knowledgeable. They know the systems, they know the programs, they know how to do their work. They're trustworthy, they provide better customer service. And so there's a lot of really good benefits from having that. But we feel a squeeze. We feel a squeeze physically, I mentioned in the budget message. And that being that, when you have all the employees that you need and they're all here at the same time, it's not a lot of space. We're bumping elbows and we're rubbing shoulders, which is good because you don't have to go very far to get an answer from another department. But we're feeling that squeeze, and so we're building a public works building. That's part of the budget this year. You'll see we're taking out some debt to finish that project. We're also asking our citizens right now in an election that will take place next Tuesday to pass a $17 million bond to build a police station. And that will also provide some additional space capacity for that department, which is needed. And so we're physically feeling a squeeze that way. We're continuing to see some costs on the personnel services side. Healthcare, we got hit with between 9 and 12% increases in healthcare this year, particularly on the insurance healthcare side. Property and liability insurances weren't as expensive, which was nice. But we're feeling that. I've never seen PERS go down in all my years of service, but we deal with that and we handle that the best we can. So those things are just continuing to kind of add, kind of that pressure on here. The council, after doing a very long, robust engagement process with the community, landed on doing a public safety fee this last year. And that was great, right? That relieved some pressure that we were feeling last year. And so that fee outperformed on the revenue side a little bit than what we had projected, which is great. So that, coupled with the fact that we're not proposing an increase to that fee this year, means that we're feeling a little bit of the squeeze there because we projected that fee in order to be sustaining for our organization would go from $12.50 up to $30. None of us want to pay a $30 fee, myself included. And I think the council is being smart, to bring that on slowly. But because we're bringing that on slowly, we're not doing, a $1.50 increase to that fee or anything like that, right? There's no proposed major jump. We are moving forward with the consumer price index, which is part of the resolution. It adds 33 cents to that fee this year, so going from $12.50 to $12.83. That's in the budget. But again, that's an area where we made a conscious decision not to put additional burden on our citizens. But in exchange for that, we're having to make, I would call them precision cuts in our organization to be able to present a balanced budget, which we did. We'll talk about those cuts as we go through. It does result in a couple of positions going away, but those positions are currently not staffed. And so that's good. An assistant planner being one of those. Another position is staffed, but we expect that position, the person in that position, to be reassigned, and that's our administrative services manager, which is paid 80% out of the general fund and 20% out of public works funds. And so we saw some savings that way on the personnel services side in the general fund budget. We also did some things within the general fund to be able to sustain it better. We reduced our contingency in the general fund from $300,000 to $200,000. We've never, in my time being here, have used more than $100,000 in contingency. So having a $300,000 contingency, we felt we could reduce that by $100,000 to, again, provide a little bit of relief. If you all recall in our capital improvement plan, we have a 5-year plan and there's the ability to have reserves. And so that's been worked out great this last year. Everyone did all the projects they wanted to do, and some departments saved all their money and some departments used some of their money. In order to fill the general fund gap that we had, we took people's reserves from this last year, the year that we're finishing, and said, if you don't need that reserve for a future project, we're going to take it, and we're going to use it, as kind of a gap funding for this year for the general fund. So we took, a little over $100,000 of savings from the capital projects that were completed that didn't cost as much as we maybe thought, and we're, applying that to that gap in the general fund. We did a little over $100,000 in materials and services cuts. Again, precision. We really evaluated our materials and services and said, what is it that we need versus what we think we might want? And we made some really conscious decisions there. And that a lot of gratitude goes to the people behind me who looked closely at their budgets and said, I think I can do with less here. And that added up, in aggregate over $100,000. Our deputy chief position is being hired back on as a lieutenant. We're delaying that by 2 months. So that position will start, it's going to be recruited and filled hopefully in the next month and a half, 2 months. But that person will start in September. That realizes a savings of about $35,000. So there's a few little things like we did there as well to help balance the budget. But again, we did that because we wanted to, fill the squeeze, show our citizens that we're being good stewards with their money. We're not just, coming out and asking to tax more, pay more. We want to make sure that we're right-sized. I feel that we are right-sized. Our organization, it could benefit from more staffing, but we don't need more staffing to be able to do the job that we do. And I think our citizens are very fortunate to have a wonderful group of employees and public servants that serve the city really well. All right, so that's about kind of filling the squeeze. A little piece here on American Rescue Plan Act funding. We have spent all of our money minus one project, which is budgeted for this next year, or we will finish spending the money. And that is for the transfer car for the fire and EMS department. It's on order and it's expected to be delivered in August. We were hoping to get it before the end of the fiscal year, but so $260,000 is put in next year. So you'll see that. I'm not going to go over the city's financial policies. They're in the budget message here and those that apply directly to the budget. Operational and budget changes. I talked about some of the operational changes already, but in our Public Works Department, we are eliminating the support services manager, the special projects manager, and the operations manager from the budget. We're then restructuring that to, in the Public Works Department, we're adding an assistant Public Works director, a civil engineer, and a support services supervisor. The support services supervisor is the only division in our Public Works Department that doesn't have their own supervisor, so that adds it. So each of the divisions, fleet, support services, water, sewer, and street, now they'll all have a supervisor, so that's why we're adding that in. And then an administrative assistant, which will cover half of the department, and we'll have an executive assistant, which we have today, that covers the other half of the department's divisions. And then I mentioned the planner one position that was budgeted. We're not filling that this year, so that's being eliminated. That again helps balance the general fund budget. No significant changes in how the budget's constructed. We have a 5-year capital improvement plan. It's included in the document. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. That's my budget message.
Thank you, Brian. All right, so I now declare this public hearing open at 6:27. Does any of the committee have any questions for the staff?
Healthcare cost increases are typically related to utilization. Did we have a 109% utilization?
We didn't, and so we'll have sometimes an experience factor which applies to our workers' comp insurance. And I can't remember if that, I'm looking at Emily, did that? I don't think that went up. So our workers' comp insurance, the experience factor didn't, it wasn't drastic whether it went up or down. So that was pretty static. So we're part of a collective, city county insurance. So it's an experience factor with all of the cities and counties across the state that use CIS. We're subject to kind of the group collective on that.
Are we required to use CIS, or can we get secondary bidding?
You can go out and use other insurance companies. We have not done that in the city of Dallas. I know other cities that have done that. Cities that are successful in doing that are much larger than us. The city of Eugene is an example. They're not on CIS. They have their own insurance. I think they actually self-insure, if I'm not mistaken. There's a couple other larger cities that do the same. But any city of our size is with CIS.
Brian, you mentioned the former deputy chief position is going to be changed over to a lieutenant position, and there's going to be a cost savings of about $35,000. Now, when you hire that person, are you going to hire on an incremental step, or are you going to hire that person on the top step?
So it'll depend on who the candidates are. We haven't started advertising for that. And just to clarify, the $35,000 in savings will come from delaying the start date of that position by 2 months. There will be a little cost savings from a deputy chief to a lieutenant just on an annual basis because that position is paid a little bit less. But there's also room for advancement and growth within that position. There's some advanced education requirements, certifications and things that position can move into depending on who's hired. So that's why we put it at a lieutenant position, is for the opportunity for future advancement without having to become the chief.
Barring the unforeseen and unforeseeable, what are you expecting PERS to do for the next little while?
I think it'll continue to incrementally go up.
Again, barring the unforeseen.
Try to guess.
Well, what's it done for the last 3-4 years?
You've been seeing between 3 and 7%.
Are you going to go through it like
I
normal?
will go through every
Okay.
number sheet. These are just kind of general questions based
Oh,
on
okay.
my budget message.
I just want to apologize. I did send you questions. I just sent them to the wrong email, so I'm not sure you got my questions.
I didn't.
Okay.
If you didn't send it to brian.latta@dallasor.gov, I did not get them. All right, no worries.
Questions?
Rather just get them out, or I'll wait when they're relevant in the document?
Why don't we wait for those questions until we're in the number sheets? Yeah, perfect.
Great. Does any of the committee have, comments? Do we have any comments, public comments? Nope.
So we're public comments. No one in the room. Is anyone online? All right, still no one online.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing at 6:30, and we will turn it back over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Chair Williamson. So we'll start on page 11. This is our property tax sheet, so you're able to see all of the tax rates for the city all the way through the 4H at the bottom. We have our tax rate and assessed value table in the middle, and then our top 10 taxpayers by property in the city of Dallas in 2024 with the Dallas Mennonite Retirement Community Incorporated. That's the DRV at the top of the list, and an apartment complex down there at the bottom. I'm just going to flip over the page. Yes.
I noticed that we have not hit the compression ceiling yet. Does that make us unusual among cities our size?
I wouldn't say it's unusual among city our size. There are some cities that have hit that compression threshold. City of Sweet Home, for example, they're a little smaller than we are, but they're already at compression. And it just really depends because compression most often is affected where you have a lot of special districts that overlay certain properties. And so you can have, a part of your city that's in compression while another part of your city is not in compression because compression's on an individual property basis. So it really depends, but oftentimes communities that are suffering from compression will have several special districts like fire districts and cemetery districts and library districts and, that overlap. And so that's where you'll usually find a community that's in compression. So it really just depends. All right, not going to go over the budget calendar. We're in our first budget meeting today. The fiscal policies are included here, including, these are all the city's fiscal policies, not just those that relate to the budget. So if you had an opportunity to look at those, that's great. Any questions on those? All right, I'm turning to page 16. This is our department positions and the full-time equivalents. So, all the changes that I talked about with the reorganization in the Public Works Department and the general fund positions being changed are included on this document. You'll notice in the kind of the total at the bottom, we have 182 total positions. That's 8 more positions than last year. We didn't add 8, well, I shouldn't say that. We added positions, but those positions are part-time positions, particularly around lifeguards, swim instructors, and our fire paramedics and EMTs at the fire department. That's reflected in the full-time equivalent count, which is 122.975 this year. It was 125.56. So our FTE equivalent has actually gone down, meaning the overall payroll would, less FTE, but more bodies. So adding more part-time than full-time. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. The last document before we get to the capital improvement plan is the statement of bonds and loans that are outstanding as of the end of this fiscal year. We added no new debts in fiscal year 24-25. We're proposing to add some debts in fiscal year 25-26, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Any questions on our existing debts?
Just to answer the question, there's the outstanding column, which I would assume is the principal left. So what's the maturing principal? What's between that column, outstanding, and maturing principal? What's the difference between those two?
So the outstanding is the total amount left to pay. The maturing principal is our payment in 25-26. So that's our principal and interest payment in 25-26.
And then the interest. Okay, gotcha.
Yes. So for example, the top line is the 2017 sewer water refunding note. We have $2.159 million left to pay. The principal this year coming up is $374,000 and the interest is $55,702. Yeah. All right, any other questions on that page? Okay. I'm not going to go page by page in the capital improvement plan. I know Todd Brumfield submitted a lot of little dot your I's and cross your T's, which is great. I love those. And so we have those that will incorporate those changes. There's no substantive changes in there number-wise. Any questions on the CIP?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about the failing EV chargers and why they need to be replaced?
Yes.
Like
happy
what
to talk
happened?
about that. I've been asked that question before. So that capital project kind of came as a little bit of a last minute addition to the plan. In fact, the plan was constructed and then it got added. And so I questioned that myself. I was like, what's going on with them? I see them being used all the time because 4 of them are located right outside my office window. So I see them and they get used frequently. And I'm like, it seems that they all work because they all get used all the time. We also have one down at the Aquatic Center as well. And so in talking to the staff person who requested this change, it's that there are some issues that we've had with them. We've had people that use them that say, hey, I'm having an issue. It's either not working or didn't charge right. So there's some exploration that needs to take place to see kind of what the issues are with that. Each of those charging stations were put in with a grant from the Pacific Power Foundation, and we haven't done anything to maintain them. So we're going to look into kind of what's going on with that. I think there's maybe some interest around those in the room to remove that from the capital improvement plan this year. So I'll let the committee make that decision. But
And I'll just go into that a little bit more. When we get to page 57, we'll talk about this more, which is part of the expenditures. And at the end of the meeting, I will be making a motion to remove this
Oh, okay.
item from the capital and from the expenditures line items, and we'll turn it over to city council to make a finding about this and raise the idea that we're kind of kicking around is raising the fee to cover these charges instead of it just coming out of the general fund.
That's cool. If you're going to move to get rid of them, then I don't have to ask my question.
That's why I was going to wait until page 57, but since you're right on top of it, we appreciate it.
yeah.
Not knowing, but do we charge a fee for people
Yes,
utilizing?
so there's a fee that gets charged. It goes to the company EV Connect, and then we get a portion of their revenues that come back to the city. So we can adjust that just based on a contract negotiation. So we'll just do that, but that's part of a council discussion. We pay electricity for those, and we want to make sure that that's being covered with the fee that we're collecting, as well as any future maintenance of that. So there's some ongoing conversations that have to take place. Or there's conversations that have to take place and will be ongoing. So I think in the interim, we can, pause on that project. Another question?
Yeah. I wanted to ask about the training, the multi-layered training structure. Where is that going to be for the fire department?
So it's an engineered training kind of structure. It's made of metal, and it will simulate, being on roofs and, just being on a building. It's going to be located to the gravel lot on the south of the building is where it'll be located.
Okay, because I think I remember back when we toured it for Dallas Leadership that you were mentioning that that was what you would like improved, so it is going there. Excellent, okay. And then this is just one I was personally curious about. I think I remember last year, wasn't there supposed to be like a park on Hillcrest in Denton or something like that?
That's
And
Lone-
I didn't see
that's-
it crossed out, just gone.
So that's Lone Oak Park.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yep,
Okay.
that's what it's called, and it is on page 27 in the middle of the page.
Oh, okay.
So Lone Oak Park, and it's actually supposed to get built by the end of June.
Oh, okay.
So we're working on that. We have plans, and we're working on getting that constructed, so, yep. It's under construction right now. I should know, I live like 5 feet from there. Yeah, I don't drive by it every day, but I live close by, so. Yeah, it's being worked on, and it's supposed to be completed by the end of this year. Yeah. Anything,
It's fiscal year.
by the end of this fiscal year that we're in, yes. Any other questions on the capital improvement plan? All right. And if we pass by something and you're like, oh, I did have a question, we can always go back, right? This discussion is fluid as we go back and forth. All right, well, I'm going to jump right into the number sheets. So before I do, each of you got a packet, right, Kim? Yes. Okay. You all have a packet. You got the rough draft of the budget delivered to you last week. I think the rough draft would still get an A in a class, but there were some things that we identified that just need to be discussed tonight. So in this packet of materials, you have the all funds revenue and expenditures sheets, the general fund revenues and expenditures sheets, and then you'll have every department's number sheets for the general fund. The reason that you have every general fund department number sheet is because if you flip with me to page 42 in your extra packet, which is the administration expenditures, I'll point out what we discovered just this afternoon. So as you look at the number sheet, there you have the actual column for 22 and 23, and then you have the actual column for 23, 24. In your binders that you were given, that 23, 24 actual column was the budgeted numbers from 23, 24. It wasn't the actual numbers. So if you flip in your binder to the administration expenses, we can do just a quick comparison. I'm not going to do this for every number sheet, but I'm just using this as an illustration. So you'll notice that the actual salaries in 23, 24 were $431,000 budgeted. The actual amount for 23, 24 was $440,585. So it was a little bit more actual than what was budgeted. The fringe benefits was $239,201. The actual was $232,303. So a little bit less. And then under the materials and services, the budgeted amount was $2,500. The actual was $555. The materials and supplies was budgeted at $6,000. It was actually $5,615. The repairs and maintenance was $1,500. The actual was $0. And then you can continue to go down that list, and you'll see that in the materials and services, everything was less than what was budgeted, except for the maintenance and rental contracts was $764 more than budgeted, and the travel and education was $426 more than budgeted. The total for materials and services budgeted was $260,000. The actual was $221,000. So about $38,750 less than what was budgeted. And then the total at the bottom in the blue bar for actual budgeted in fiscal year 23-24 was $930,201, and the actual expensed was $894,156. As you go through each of the number sheets in the general fund, you'll see that the actual amount in 23-24 was less than what was budgeted. So if you're interested in like geeking out on budget stuff, you now have the actual amount of the history of what we spent. The history does not at all change the proposed numbers. The proposed numbers were prepared not using the numbers that you see here. We use our electronic financial software, and so we were looking at the actual numbers when we prepared the numbers here. So staff in our work, we were using the right numbers, not the budgeted numbers. So I just want to make that clear that the proposed numbers we feel are good, and they are unchanged with a few exceptions. So also in your packet, there were three things that I caught in my final review. I was talking with Todd Brumfield earlier today. You can read the document 100 times, and then you walk away from it for a few days, and you come back, and then you find the things that were incorrect. And I have them here on my phone because I texted them as a reminder to our finance director last night when I found them. So the three things that I found are really related to transfers for the most part. So in the general fund revenue transfers, so if you go to your binder on the general fund revenues, so this is page 38, you'll see under, it's actually page 39, sorry. On page 39, you'll see that the transfer amount is $42,500. You see that? The last transfer from the grant fund, $42,500. Sorry, this is on page 39. $42,500 from the grant fund. If you go to the grant fund, the transfer amount was actually $40,000. So in your packet that you have, under the general fund revenues, that's been changed to $40,000. And then each of the lines that affects down below, the total reimbursements and transfers, the total revenues, and the total have been adjusted as well. So
Printed in red just to signify that
they're
those are the
printed in
adjusted
red.
ones.
Yeah, the numbers that are printed in red have been adjusted. So that's error number one that we caught and fixed. Error number two is in the non-departmental general fund transfers. So if you go to the non-departmental page, that's on page 58 and 59 of your budget. You'll see there is a transfer to the sewer SDC loan reimbursement for $43,709. So you see that there, right? If you go to the SDC page for revenues, which is on page 68, you'll notice that transfer coming in was not included. So we forgot, we transferred it out of the non-departmental expenditures for the general fund, but we didn't actually receive the revenue in the SDC fund. So that's been corrected in your packet that we gave you. And then the last change was in the sewer fund. So if you go to the sewer fund, which is on page 84, you'll notice that the sewer fund debt service line for the 2017 loan principal in your binder says $620,000. We got a little finger happy with the zeros. That should be $62,000, not $620,000.
So you were off by 90%. No, that'd be more like 1,000, wouldn't
A
it?
lot more than that, a lot more than that. So, so we fixed that, and now it's 62,000, as it should be. And so the all fund revenues and expenditures have some red on them. That's to fix those three errors that I just talked about. So now you know why you have the extra packet. It's one, to show you all of the actual amounts of 23, 24, so that you have that. And then it also shows the three issues that I brought up being fixed. So I would consider, as you make a motion, if we make a motion tonight, that you can make a motion to say as presented, and that includes all the changes that I just talked about, okay? All right. And then if you want to make any other motions like the EV charging stations, we'll do that in addition at the end. All right, so now let's go back to the number sheets. I'm not going to discuss the all fund revenues and the expenditures. That's just the roll up of every expenditure and revenue that's in the budget. So we won't go over those. But you might note that it has gone up to just under $98 million. That includes a $17.2 million bond if it passes next week. If it doesn't, we will take that out of the budget before we go to the city council for adoption. So that number could drop significantly if the bond does not pass next week. All right, general fund. General fund revenues, some went up, some went down. Overall, the general fund revenues went down slightly from 20 million to almost 21 million down to about 19 and a half. So that's where we are there. A lot of that was reflective in the American Rescue Plan Act funds being spent. Any questions on general fund revenues overall? All right, let's flip the page to go to general fund expenditures summary. Again, when you look at each of the expense lines there, our materials and services, so our personnel services went up by roughly $700,000. But the materials and services, capital outlay, debt service, each of those went down. The transfer to other funds went up a little bit, and that's for the fire, or sorry, it didn't go up, it stayed the same. That's the fire trust. And then the non-departmental transfers went up a little bit. But the reserves are also down a little bit. That's reflective of the capital improvement plan. You'll see the operating contingencies dropped again from 300,000 to 15 to 200,000. And then your unappropriated fund balance is just under $1.5 million, or just below 1.6 million at 1.593. That is 10% of the operating budget of the general fund, which is consistent with your financial policy that says you have to maintain 10%. Any questions on general fund expenditure summary?
Yes, I noticed that healthcare costs have gone up, but I also noticed you guys are with Regions. Do you guys get to shop your plans? Because Regions isn't even in network with Salem Health anymore.
We don't like that. So yes, there's opportunities to shop a few plans that CIS provides for it. It gives us an opportunity for. We're only able to do that during kind of the selection period, which we had already made the choice to stay with Regents before the Salem Health and Regents had their falling apart. So we're kind of stuck with them for now, but we are looking at some other opportunities in the future.
Why do we have two different dental plans?
Because they're offered, and we like to give our employees options where we can. So we go with both Delta Dental and Willamette, are the two options. Mm-hmm. Any other questions there? All right, we'll jump into the administrative expenditures. Not a whole lot to say here other than we are, you'll see that personnel services is going up by, 27,000, and your materials and services is reducing by about 28,000. And so, overall, a small reduction in your expenses in the administration department. Any questions there?
Yeah, so I think it's the same in the finance department as with the administration department, where you guys used your reserves to pay for general expenses. Yeah, so I think in general, we don't like to use funds that are allocated for that to fund general services. So does that point to problems next budget season?
It does point, so that's what I talked about with kind of feeling the squeeze. We don't like to do that. And so we made kind of the conscious decision this year to look at our capital funds. Each department in the general fund got some amount of capital funding. We looked at our plan and said, does the administration department, does the finance department have a project, in the near future? The answer was no. And so the money that we did not spend this last year is being put towards general expenses. We have money in future years, that could go towards a project. But for last year and this year's funds, we decided to forego that. Other departments that are more apt to have, construction projects or purchases, like the fire and EMS department, facilities, the parks department, they all had projects that they completed this last year, and most of those came in under budget. So the money that they didn't spend and that they don't need for a future project, right? We looked in the future for the 5-year plan and said, do you need any of the money that you're able to save this year for a future project? If the answer was yes, we didn't touch that money. If the answer was no, then we took that money for this fiscal year. We did not reduce future years' allocations. We expect, every department to get their money that they expect in the future, minus any money that they saved this year.
So then how will you, I guess, balance that next year if you are planning to use those funds for capital stuff next year?
So there's a couple of things we're going to keep a really close eye on. One is we're restructuring how we're coding our ambulance billing. And we expect, we've already seeing gains with that. And so we hope as we grow that would be able to also buy more, firefighter paramedics. But depending on what we see there, there's opportunities for increased revenue there. We're raising kind of our general city services fees. We do that on an annual basis. So we expect to see, a little bit of bump there. It's just something we're really going to have to pay close attention to as we go throughout the year. I'm not going to hold back to say that, we might get mid-year and find out that maybe our revenues that we were expecting aren't coming in as we expect. And we may have to have some additional cutting that goes on mid-year. And we'll certainly look at that as an option. We will have conversations around other revenue sources that the city council can pursue, including a bump on the public safety fee as an example. So those are things that we just need to look at as we go throughout the year, looking at next fiscal year.
Like get healthcare costs down.
And try to keep those expenses, in check. So, yeah. All right. So library is next on page 43. Again, salaries are going up a little bit, both salary and fringe. Your materials and services, Mark, our librarian, is awesome, does great work. He has great staff. Andrea is here tonight as well. They like to increase their book budget every year. So this year they increased it by $1,500 while making cuts in other areas of their materials and services. Their reserves, they do have future projects that will use the money that they were given. So they received $45,000 last year, $45,000 this year, and you'll notice that we didn't take any of that money for operating expenses. So theirs is a department that does have need for that capital money in the future, so we did not take any of that money. Any questions on the library? All right, excellent. Parks and Recreation, you'll see here that the salaries and fringe benefits actually go down from $544,000 to $413,500. That is reflective of our administrative services manager position, who was formerly known as the Parks and Recreation Manager. That position being removed from the city budget is where we were realizing the savings there. And then in materials and services, you'll notice the biggest drop is really on the community events and promotions line. If we had $70,000 last year, we dropped that to $13,000 this year. And that is indicative of the transient lodging tax funds have been moved from this expense line over to economic and community development in a partnership with the Dallas Area Visitor Center is where a lot of that funding is going to. And so it made sense not to have it come out of parks, but rather come out of economic and community development. So that's where that money has been moved to. In addition, one of the cost saving measures that we're doing is we're not going to do a Veterans Day firework display this year. And so that saves $12,000 as well. That decision was made as well to help balance the general fund budget. So that was an additional cut we made. In the capital outlay, the equipment that we're buying is a new lawnmower, as well as a contribution towards a forklift. And the building and park improvements, the $80,000 is to resurface the basketball courts at the city park. All right, any other questions on that?
Just a quick one.
Yes.
Why is the Japanese garden called out versus any other park in the city?
We wanted to make sure that the Japanese garden, as a recently constructed finished project, something that the council is very proud of, they wanted to make sure that we had kind of a dedicated maintenance line for that. And so that's why it's called out specifically.
It's a good idea because the old one had fallen into pretty serious disrepair.
And we also, there was a private contribution that was made towards that as well, so kind of some money going towards that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you tell me how that Veterans Day firework thing came about? or why you decided to cut that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it hurts me to say this because I was the one that kind of moved it from the summer event to the Veterans Day. And so I loved having it, and I think it's great. And our fire and EMS department with the volunteers does a great job at putting that on. So when we were looking at kind of the gap that we had to fill for the general fund, we looked at positions, we looked at our materials and services, we looked at expenses, and we looked at things that we'd like to do but don't have to do, right? We have to respond to people who are in need. 911 calls, water line breaks, stuff like that. We don't have to have a fireworks show. It's nice, the community comes together, a lot of people enjoy that. But we really saw that as a nice to have, and it cost $12,000, right, for 20 minutes of fun. And we felt to be good stewards, that was an area that we decided to cut.
Did it have anything to do with veterans being opposed to it, or did you hear anything from veterans, or did veterans have an input into this?
We didn't do an engagement on that. When we were working on this budget, and kind of discovered kind of how big of a hole we had to fill, we had a short amount of time to resolve that, and so. We didn't find the time to really kind of engage the community. I will say that in the past we have had, and Michael probably is going to raise his hand for this, but in the past we have had some feedback on the Veterans Day fireworks show. Every year we get maybe one or two people that will contact the city and say, hey, why are we doing fireworks for veterans that maybe have PTSD or some not positive reaction to fireworks. So we get a few of those each year. Some of them are veterans and some are not, just people that sympathize, and we understand that, and that's great. We also get a lot of positive feedback from veterans and non-veterans. Hey, this is awesome. I'm a veteran. Didn't know this was happening. I'm going to be there next year. I love it. And so we have had that feedback from the community about that event in the past.
Lastly, what do you propose to recognize veteran? I am a veteran, and there's a big community of veterans. So in light of saving $12,000, how do you recognize veterans?
That's an awesome comment. So the Buildings and Grounds Committee of the Council has that as an agenda topic to discuss this summer. After the last firework display show that we had, this topic of, hey, can we support veterans maybe in a different way had come up, and we decided to discuss that at a future Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting. So that'll be a topic of discussion this summer as we prepare for Veterans Day this year, and knowing that we're not going to do fireworks because we can't afford it. What can we do, right, in a way to honor and recognize our veterans? Because we do have a lot in this community, including some people around this table. So we certainly recognize them, we value them, we want to make sure that they're honored. So we just need to figure out a way to do that, and the council committee will pick up that task. So we do. So we have some existing programs that honor veterans. We have our Hometown Hero Banner program. So anyone who has been a veteran can participate in that. They buy a banner for $100, and we display that year after year. So that's one way of doing that. We recognize that. Our cemetery does a wonderful Memorial Day service honoring veterans that are interred up there. So there's things that our community does, I think, to support them already. But is there something else that we can do on Veterans Day? And I think there is. We just don't know what that is yet.
Would it be possible to make some sort of collaborative effort with like Independence or Monmouth? If there's, obviously I understand the need for filling the gaps in the budget, but going forward, if there are some additional funds, is it something where we could kind of split with other local cities, close by that are, I'm sure all of us go to, downtown Monmouth and downtown Independence at some point, especially them having the park there?
Yeah, I think there's certainly areas to for partnership and collaboration. We do a lot of work with Monmouth and Independence on different things. I wouldn't be surprised knowing that the fireworks are not going to be included in the city budget. We could do some community fundraising and probably raise $12,000 in a heartbeat. And it could be a community led and driven event. I'm sure our fire and EMS staff and volunteers would love to help put that on. It's not something that I felt as the budget officer to include as a nice to have when we were also looking at positions being taken. So I'm understanding that. But I think there are opportunities, not only with other cities, but within our own community to say, hey, we want to celebrate and honor veterans, and we're willing to fundraise, right? I would put my own money towards that as well. So.
show on the 4th of July as being potentially cut.
Saw that too.
City of Independence is having a hard time with their budget this year. Won't dive into a lot of details because I don't know a lot of details, but working kind of closely with their city from time to time, I know they're facing a lot of painful decisions this year. So Dallas is in a better position, which is great. We love it, right? We're being proactive, and I'm not comparing us to Independence, although I think we're so much better. But a lot of cities are really struggling. I just came back from the League of Oregon Cities Conference. Councilor Spivey was there, as well as Mayor Slack. And, we heard that probably, 2/3 of the communities in Oregon are facing some sort of budget shortfall this year. And we expect, most, if not all, cities to be facing it within the next 5 years. So we're in company with a lot of others.
This is a case where misery doesn't love company.
Right.
Yeah.
But, again, I'm proud of the fact that we put together a budget that's balanced, that, looked at, how do we tighten our belts as opposed to, loosen the belt with just more revenues. So. Got your comment answered. Okay, excellent. All right, next is the Aquatic Center. So we're on page 46. Halfway there, people. It's great. Aquatic Center salaries have gone up a little bit. I will say Aquatic Center is doing awesome on the revenue side. So I didn't highlight that in the general fund revenues, but they outperformed what we expected and budgeted this last year. So we're happy about that. We expect that to continue as we're getting more instructors, more classes. We're continuing to see that just get better and better. It does not pay for itself 100%. Very few of our city services do that. Building, fire, EMS, not fire, but EMS, pay for themselves. And that's really about it. Other than our enterprise funds, they're required to pay for themselves. But as far as general fund services go, Aquatic Center does a really good job. And so I don't mind seeing an increase in their personnel services. Most of that comes from just having more lifeguards, more instructors. I talked about that in the FTE schedule. All right. Yes.
The good work that the Friends of the Aquatic Center do, particularly in fundraising for project support, do those dollars appear anywhere in this document?
So they do. They're under the trusts fund, which we'll get to later. We can talk about that there. All right, materials and services, overall, it's only increasing by $1,000. They did a really good job at reducing where they could, especially like repairs and maintenance. They reduced that by $15,000. A lot of their lines went up, from a couple $100 to maybe a couple $1,000. Computer services kind of being the largest jump, because IT was also an area where we're expecting a lot of upgrades, a lot of computers that need to be replaced, Windows operating systems need to be upgraded. We're just kind of at an end of life cycle. So this year, you'll notice in computer services in each of the funds are more than it has traditionally been an increase. So that's just something to point out as you go through the rest of the budget. Capital for Aquatic Center is replastering the leisure pool, and then there's the old play equipment that's in the leisure pool with the leisure area. That's being replaced with a new slide. It's a smaller slide, not a big slide like the one, the smaller one for kids. And then also, we're $30,000 is being budgeted for some window tinting in the natatorium area, as well as doing the floors in the locker rooms. So that's the capital stuff there. All right, anything else on the Aquatic Center? Yes.
The increase in personnel, would that give possibly more opportunity for revenue? If there's more lifeguards, is there possibly more time? Or if there's more swim instructors, is there more swim classes being offered?
So I think the instructors is where you'll have an increase in more. I think our Aquatic Center staff and the management leadership there has done a really good job at seeing, kind of what makes the money versus what doesn't. And they've restructured their hours. They're on top of making sure their fees are competitive. And so we've done a number of things there to just help with that. But yes, having more instructors gives more classes opportunity, more opportunities for classes, more students. And so that's we're realizing revenue with that. All right, let's keep going. I missed a question. Yeah, Carla, sorry.
Yeah, fees on Aquatic Center. Is there a different fee for people that are outside of Dallas or within city of Dallas?
Yes, so there's a premium for people that live outside the city. I can't remember if that's a percentage based. No, it still exists. There's a premium for people that live outside. I can't remember what the percentage is. It's not significant, 10 to 15%, maybe.
I asked the question only because I know I've heard somewhere where they reduce the fees of people that lived outside of Dallas, just to make it competitive, just to make it fair for everyone. But if they did that, maybe we can think about, just elevating or at least having a different fee. So I don't know if you know what the answer is, 100%, if there is or if there isn't.
So I know the fees are different for people that live outside than people that live inside. That's for memberships, right? Not for like your daily use fee. I mean, people that come in that on the daily, it's the same. It's people just for memberships. So if you want like an annual membership, there's a different rate for people outside the city than people inside the city. And so
Out of, raising that fee,
like having it be even more expensive for people outside.
we have to raise revenues somewhere.
Yes,
I mean,
so-
we're cutting revenues in certain places, and we should at least raise it somewhere.
Yeah, we're trying not to cut revenues, we're cutting expenditures, but on the revenues, we do increase and look at the fees for all of our city services annually. We're doing that right now. We'll have that before the council in June, your work session for a review. And then that will be adopted by resolution at your second meeting in June for effect. It'll be effective July 1st for most of the fees. Aquatic center fees raise on a calendar year, so those go into effect in December. But yes, we will look at the aquatic center fees. You'll have at least a 2.8% increase, which is the consumer price index for this last year. So that's what we're proposing as a baseline. Some of the fees might go up a little bit higher than that, just depending on what we see. So yes, we look at those fees every year and we do make increases.
You have to be careful with that when you're talking about something like the aquatic center, because you have to think about the elasticity of demand. Sometimes if you raise fees, you actually reduce revenue because usage drops, and it works the other way around. Sometimes you can lower fees and end up making more money because more people use it. So that's a tricky one. You got to be real careful with that.
Thank you.
I think we've hit a pretty good sweet spot with the aquatic center, right? Where we're realizing more revenues than we have in the past, and I'd be pretty proud of how we're handling that operation. All right, page 48 is finance expenditures. Make sure I didn't skip one. Yep. All right, so finance, again, same story on the personnel, going up a little bit. In the materials and services, some areas are going up, such as computer services. They pay for a lot more of computer services than other departments. Because they're smarter and they do computer stuff, and everyone else doesn't. Their billing software is also going up by $4,000, and their professional services, which pays for some of our systems that we have, is going up by $5,000, and then the audit is also going up by $5,000. They are reducing travel and education, which we did across all general fund departments. Travel and education went down a little bit, as again to cost savings for the general fund. Any questions on finance? All right, municipal court, which is underneath the umbrella of the finance, and our finance director is Cecilia Ward. Salaries are staying the same. We have one employee, a municipal court clerk. We also have a bailiff, which is paid out of this line as well. Fringe is going up a little bit, $1,000. Office expenses is being zeroed out. That's being combined with materials and supplies. So you see that line go up by $200. The professional services going up by $5,000. That's for things like court-appointed attorneys and other work within the court. And then again, travel and education going down by a little bit. Any questions on municipal court? All right. Yes.
On the 24-25 amended, the 4,000.
Say that again.
Office expense,
Yeah.
it goes 452, then 4,000, then 0. What was the difference this last year amended?
So for the actual in 2022, 2023, it was $935 for office expenses. And then the budgeted amount in 23, 24 was $4,800. The actual amount that we spent in that year was $452. And then we budgeted 4,000 the year we're in right now. We're proposing to combine office expenses and materials and supplies into one expense line. So whatever we charge to office expenses in the past, which has been, between $500 and $1,000, is going to be combined with materials and supplies, which has been between, in the last few years, $3,800 to $6,000, a little over $6,000. So we're putting $6,200 total for those two lines together. If we would have combined them and kept them at what we budgeted them last year, it would have been $10,000. So we're actually reducing that by $3,800 cost saving measures, and we think we can get by with $6,200 for those two lines combined. You might notice that in some other funds as well, where we have office expenses and materials and supplies. We're zeroing out the office expenses line and just merging those two together. So, all right, Fire and EMS Department. So again, you'll see the same story in personnel services, some increases based on what we've already talked about. Overtime, we are proposing a $300,000. One of the things with fire and EMS is we do conflagration work, right? Where another state is on fire, we send our people down and do the work. We pay for the overtime for the people that go down and fight that fire. We also pay the overtime for people that backfill here when those employees that would normally work here are gone. So all of that is reimbursed from the state that asked for that help, whether it was our own state or a different state. That money comes into the general fund as revenue, but it doesn't come in necessarily fast or even within the same fiscal year. So that's why the overtime budget is really healthy there, is for the conflagration work. There's also a lot of overtime that department uses. And so we're budgeting a high number, but that's why that's higher, just if you're wondering. In the materials and services, Fire and EMS did a really good job at making reductions, seeing kind of, if you recall, this department used to have a fire budget and an EMS budget, and we kind of combined them 2 years ago. And so as we've combined them, we've looked to be able to right-size the numbers. So this year, they did a really good job at right-sizing those numbers in the direction of a lot of reductions. You will see under dispatch services and professional services, those numbers are increasing significantly. Dispatch services from our budgeted number last year to this year is about 12.5%. And then the professional services, a lot of that comes from is dictated by our call volume. So the more calls we get, the higher that professional services number is, because our contracts for those services are based on the number of calls we receive. So you see that numbers going up because our call numbers are also increasing as our community grows and more people are using our services. So the fire and EMS chief, if she were up here, she would tell you that they're busy. And that is the truth. And we love them, and we're trying to support them. I think the way that we're doing our coding consistent with how our billing companies advise us to do that we're going to see more revenue, and we'll be able to hopefully give them some support as we continue with that program. It's too early to make that decision today, but as we go throughout the year, we hopefully can make that decision, if not sometime this year, at least by next budget.
Question on the overtime?
Yes.
So you had said previously that in our other budget, you had removed the 100,000 because we didn't really use that much in the contingencies. So on the overtime, it looks like I understand budgeting for it for like the wildfire season, all of that. But it doesn't look like on here, the last two for 2022, 23 to 24, that we use nearly anywhere close to what we had budgeted for. Is the overtime budget, is it kind of affected by like the weather and how we're thinking the summer is starting versus if it's going to be more rainy through June, if we're having dry weather? Is that somewhere where maybe we could look at moving some other funds out if we say the 5-year average is between 150 and 195,000 versus the 340 and 300?
So I think, if you look at the overtime for actual 22-23, the budget you're looking at here at the time was just fire. So that was 144,113 for fire. And then if you flip over the page to the EMS budget, the overtime for EMS was almost 54,000. So combined you were about 200,000 for overtime in that actual year. The overtime went down a little bit for the actual in 23, or that was budgeted 23-24, wasn't it? What was the actual? Let's open up our other document. I don't have that in front of me. The actual for that was 194. So it was 194, 348. So we were roughly at $200,000 for those 2 years. The $300,000, we feel comfortable with that number being in order to cover us. I don't think we're looking and saying, hey, the Earth's getting warmer, or more fires, more severe fires, but we just want to make sure we have a number that covers what we're expecting. So $300,000, we feel pretty comfortable with that. Could it be pulled back a little bit? Maybe enough to get a fireworks show, but but just to be safe, we're budgeting $300,000 for that. Yeah, because you just never know.
This year's general fund.
Can you explain the difference between uniform allowance and the turnout PPE?
Yes, so our turnouts are what our firefighters use, and April, correct me if I'm wrong. Our turnouts are what our firefighters use when they are actively fighting a fire, right? So the running in the building is what keeps them protected. Our uniforms are what they wear when they're not fighting a fire, right? So it could be, a T-shirt that says Dallas Fire and EMS. It could be their more formal uniforms that they wear when they're, representing the department. So that's the uniform allowance, and the turnouts are the clothing that they're wearing when they're actively fighting fire to keep them safe.
I don't know if this is the time to ask this, but I will and feel free to dismiss it if it's really not, but the problems that we're going to have with replacing the turnouts because of the carcinogenic effect, is that going to have a big impact here?
It could over time. We try to get on a rotation with turnouts so that we're not having to replace everyone's turnouts at the same time. So we try to budget so that we're able to kind of do that on a rotational basis. But yeah, there's all sorts of things, new regulatory requirements coming out that require us to make those changes, and we do that, within our budget as allowed. Yeah, Micah.
Say we ended up needing more money for that, and we're coming out of the fire season. Could you then reallocate some of that from overtime over to PPE equipment, or?
Yes, so if we, get to near the end of the year and we're realizing, hey, we need to buy some more turnouts and we didn't use as much overtime as we thought, the council can do a budget amendment to make that change. Micah, did you have a question first? Okay, and then Carlos.
Maybe I missed it, but within the last couple of months, we were introduced to a health screening. Is that somewhere in here, or is that something that we didn't add yet?
Built into your professional services budget, right, Chief?
Yeah, I can just speak a
Sure,
little bit
come on
about
up.
that. Thank you, Councilor Jans. So we are going to do a tiered process when it comes to our medical physicals for our firefighters, just because that is a new program for us. We've also built that into our volunteer trust as well that we've transferred. I've talked to our volunteers about them supporting that same medical physical standard. So they will be paying, the volunteers will be paying for the volunteer suppression firefighters' medical physicals. The general fund budget that we have will pay for our paid staff.
Sure was in there.
Yes, and that's going to be a 3-year process, just because it would be very expensive for us to do everybody in 1 year. When you're talking about like $8,000 potentially, it's about $3,000 per person. So it's expensive, and if you are doing everybody at the same time, and not everybody is going to be required to have those medical physicals done every year. So it'll be on a tiered process, and we're doing the same thing with our volunteers as well. Thank you.
Carlos?
Question on turnout gear. As you mentioned previously, we have some type of a universal response where our firefighters sometimes go out for mutual aids, different states, or stuff like that. So is the turnout gear that they use here, is that sufficient to go someplace else, or is that something that we have to pay for, or is that something that the other party has to pay for?
Yeah, so we don't. Our turnouts are in compliance with what we call the NFPA standard, the National Fire Protection Agency standards, and so that should be broadly applicable across the United States. We don't have to have a different kind of turnout if we go fight a fire in California or Utah or Oregon or Washington. It's universal. All right, any other questions on fire and EMS? Okay, good. EMS expenditures on page 52. This is only here because, again, you have to show by law the 3 previous years' funds and expenses, which we are showing in fiscal year 22-23. Next year, this sheet will go away altogether because we don't have to show it if it was zeros. All right, police department expenditures on page 53. So again, personnel services, you're seeing that increase. We were keeping overtime the same at 125,000. Office expenses are combining with materials and supplies. Weapon skills is being reduced a little bit. I think your big reductions, fuel by about 5,000. Your professional services went down by about 5,000. Travel and training was reduced by about 3,000. Dispatch and computer services both saw significant increases. Again, the 12.5% over what we budgeted last year. Your capital for the police department include a patrol vehicle and maybe 2 vehicles, 130,500 for that. We'll see if we can squeeze and play some magic there. And then the equipment is car and body cameras at $83,500. Any questions in the police department? Yeah.
I'm unfamiliar with Rain and Mark 43.
That has to do with, I'm going to turn that over to the chief.
Rain and Mark 43, that's a records management system.
Okay, thank you. Perfect, thank you. And then the body cameras and car cameras, that's going to be an every year expense?
That's an every year expense. So in the capital improvement plan, we budget $83,500 every year just to replace the body cameras and the car cameras as needed. So technology is expensive.
It's a problem with the cameras in the cars and for our evidence, and also it all ties together and it keeps us upgraded.
Okay.
Have the right new stuff.
Thank you.
So we're paying over $500,000 for dispatch fees. I guess two questions. Would the police chief and the fire chief agree with that 12% increase? Do they see that as reasonable? And then also, is there any talk from Willamette Valley Communications about any kind of consolidation or any way to save some of their outrageous fees every year, which is pretty much every year?
It's becoming the standard, and I would say that we're not happy, and I don't think anyone who has to use Willamette Valley Communications systems, I'm not speaking for them, but I would venture to guess that most of them are not happy, and we're starting to have some conversations about what we can do different. Before we went to Willamette Valley Communications, we used to have Polk County, covered by Polk County. Do we go back to something like that? Is that feasible? There's a huge lift that comes with that, initial investment, but does it make sense? Where we have a little bit more control. So I think there's going to be some conversations that are going to have to take place so that we're not continuing to see these massive increases, because they're not tenable and they're not sustainable in the long run. All right, anything else on the police department? Yeah, Carlos.
Evidence control is a critical portion or critical discipline within any police department. Is there any reason why, the costs or the expenditures are going down? Or am I just missing something there?
Chief, or Deputy Chief Ma, our future chief, up to talk about that specifically.
So we bulk purchased evidence supplies this last year, and we also replaced the evidence refrigerator, so thinking we get by with that.
So what I'm looking at is evidence control, and it was $2,095, then $3,199. Then it goes down to $2,500 and $1,500. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so I think what Deputy Chief Mott was saying is that this year that we're in right now, we purchased some larger things that we expect. So we've been catching up in the last few years, and he's feeling like this year we can get by with a little bit less. Yeah. All right. Anything else on the police department? All right. We'll move on then to economic and community development. So we're on pages 55. I'm going to repeat myself as a broken record. Personnel services, you'll see they are going up a little bit, or actually they're going down this year. And that's because of the planner position that was removed from the budget. In addition, you'll also, we increased a little bit of the revenues, or a little bit of the personnel costs are being increased out of urban renewal for both Charlie, our economic community development director, our economic development specialist position, as well as the executive assistant in the department. So those two moves have made it so that the costs are less on personnel services by roughly $95,000. In materials and services, overall it's dropping by about $10,000. The biggest increase is in the tourism line, going from 85,000 to 105. That's indicative of the change from the parks department for the community events and promotions spending for the tourism dollars, the TLT funds, the transient lodging taxes. And then there's a few other lines that are increasing by a couple $1,000s, and then some lines that are being decreased. Professional services is the biggest decrease, from 43,000 to 18,360. We completed some larger professional services projects, some big planning projects this year, so that's why you're seeing the decrease there. We still have some things we're doing this next year, but not as much as we did this last year. Any questions on economic and community development?
So the planner position, it says it was never even advertised. Was that just because you guys saw expenses coming?
It wasn't advertised because we didn't have the physical space to put them anywhere. And we budgeted anticipating our current planner having some additional caseload work, which he did. He's been able to kind of accommodate that and manage that. So it was a position that, in looking at position reductions this year, it's always easier to cut someone that you don't have to say to their face, goodbye. And it's a position that we feel we can get by without for this year. All right, I'm going to turn the page over to facilities maintenance. So we have a facilities department. Personnel services are going up slightly in that department. In the materials and services, you're seeing a reduction in repairs and maintenance by about 5,000. Increases in your computer services and professional services by 1,000 each. A reduction in half for travel and education. The senior center contract. It's a donation that we give to the senior center each year. By contract is $42,000. They did request by letter to me an increase in that to $100,000 this year. Given that we're under contract at $42,000, that contract was this is year 2, what you're looking at here of a 5-year contract. And knowing that we're squeezing other places in the general fund, I didn't feel that there was the capacity to add to that contract this year. So I'm proposing to keep that at $42,000. And then again, your miscellaneous expenses are increasing by $3,000. That's just to make sure we're consistent with what we've been spending out of that line the last couple of years. Building improvements in the capital outlay expense line. The police heating and cooling systems is $35,000. That is the on top of the annex building here. If the police station bond is successful next week, that project will not happen. Because we're not going to install a system that we're just going to tear it out. If the bond does not pass, we will move forward with that project. That's $35,000. And then we talked about the EV charging stations earlier. It sounds like there's at least some interest to remove that project from the capital improvement plan and this expense line. If we want to make that motion, we can make that motion maybe at the end of the meeting today. Anything else for that fund? Okay.
Motion will be made.
Motion will be made by Councilor Schilling. All right, non-departmental expenditures. So this is money that's out of the general funds. These are general fund dollars, but it's just not tied to a specific department. So you have capital outlay. The one ARPA project is the transfer car for the EMS division of the fire and EMS department. Our IT equipment is our other capital expense. We budget roughly $50,000 a year for that. We expect to spend that this year. Under transfers, you have transfer to risk management. That's for your property and liability insurances. That's proposed to increase a little bit, not as much as health, but it's going up. Transfer to long-term debt is there. That is for our PERS obligation bonds that we bought several years ago. We're paying that off. Our last debt service payment on that, I believe, is next year, or maybe 2 years. It's coming up. So it's coming up soon. Next year, I think, is maybe the maximum payment that we'll make, and then the last payment in 2027, I think, drops down significantly. So looking forward to getting that paid off. And then there's the transfer to sewer SDC for a loan that we took out recently from that interfund loan. Then you have your debt service payments there as well for the urban renewal loans, and the building, the former Radio Shack building that we bought is also included there. Any questions on the non-government or non-departmental expenditures? Yes.
If that transfer vehicle is in fact for fire and EMS, why does it appear here and not in theirs?
It's paid for out of ARPA funding. So, and all the ARPA expenses were billed out of this expense line.
So it's for what, because of where the revenues, the coming.
Yeah, what money is being spent.
Got
So
it.
we're tracking all of the ARPA projects out of this expense line.
Got it.
Yep. All right.
I know it's old news since we've had the Jefferson Building for a while. That's where Willamette Valley Fiber is, right? So is the city a landlord for that?
Yes.
And they pay rent, so that's included in the revenue somewhere?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Do they ever think they'll buy the building, or?
They haven't. They're on a month-to-month lease with us right now. They made their initial, I think, 5 years of rent payments all at once up front. And now we've transitioned to a month-to-month. And so I talked with them about wanting to renew that. They said, let's keep going at least, on a month-to-month lease for now. But they might look at a longer-term arrangement in the future. They have a 99-year lease for their equipment that they put on the property, but the building itself is a month-to-month lease. So if the city needed that for some reason, that could be a space that the city could utilize in the future. With a month notice.
Yeah.
All right, let's turn the page on page 60. I know we're just plowing through the budget tonight. If you have to get up and use the restroom or stretch your legs, feel free. I won't be offended. All right, risk management fund revenues. So this is all transfers that come in. So transfer from the general fund, building inspection fund, and the public works funds. Those are all included right there. There's also some miscellaneous revenues that come in. We're budgeting $10,000 this year. And then on the expenditure side, property and auto insurance, liability insurance, workers' comp, and then the materials and supplies. Total expenditures are going up a little bit. Total revenues are also increased. Actually, they decreased by $471. Any questions on risk management? All right, let's jump into another special fund, the street fund. So revenues for the street fund in total are increasing by roughly $600,000. Most of that increase comes from the finance proceeds. That's $465,000, which is coming from a loan that the city will take out for the Public Works building. This is their share of that loan. I think the total loan that we're asking for is around $3 million, Cecilia? $3.2 million. And that's coupled with the $2.2 million that the city has paid in cash for that project. So that's where that is. The beginning fund balance is reducing by a little bit, a little less than $50,000 it looks like. But overall, again, the revenues are increasing slightly. Any questions on revenues for the street fund? That includes like the state gas tax, the federal fund exchange, so the federal gas tax money we get, all of that's included there. All right, expenditures on the street fund. In general, it's increasing overall. Our operating contingency at the bottom is decreasing by a little over $100,000. And that's again because we're spending a little bit more money. Materials and services expenses are increasing by $30,000. Professional services is increasing by about $50,000. Our capital outlay projects, equipment, we're buying a new vac truck this year, which is super helpful for a lot of our projects. The street fund is paying a proportionate share of that. We're also splitting the forklift that's being purchased for the yard. And so that's a portion of that's also being paid out of the street fund. We have contractual overlays, so paving streets, sidewalk projects. We always budget $100,000 for that. We're doing an ADA ramp program. That's not the ramps that are being put in by ODOT on state highways.
But everybody thinks
Can
are
I,
ours.
can I repeat that? We are not paying any money for that. That is a state project. But we will be doing ADA ramps. We have been doing ADA ramps on city-owned streets, particularly where we go and do the paving projects. We go back after we do the paving and we upgrade the ADA ramps. It's required by ADA law. We want to do that. And so we're kind of chasing our program for the street paving with ADA ramp programs. You're seeing some of that work taking place right now on, is it Birch Street, I think, that goes up towards Oakdale Elementary School. So some of the work's taking place there right now. And there's other projects that we do, throughout the year. We're going to be doing work over off of Ash Street in Holman this summer. When school's out, that's where a lot of this money's going to be spent this next year.
Chasing that one, right?
We're not chasing that one. That's going to be happening at the same time. So they're going to be doing, well, the paving on Ash already took place, but we're going to be paving Holman and doing the ADA work all around the high school this year. All right. And then the Public Works Building expenses are shown there. That's both the revenue from the finance proceeds plus the cash on hand is what's being expensed out of that. There's some transfers and some debt that we have that gets paid off as well. Any questions on street fund? Yeah.
Is there ever an opportunity to outsource some of this? I'm thinking of the vac truck, for example. Sometimes you have businesses around town that actually have to find a business to come and like the overflow. And I've paid as a business owner for that. Given that the city might have some, could there be opportunities for some revenue for maybe just paving or using some of that equipment and actually charging a small business for it or businesses? Or is there just not enough personnel to do that?
Yeah, there's a capacity issue there. Our vac truck's busy with city projects, I would say. So like enterprising out into the private market, I don't know, I'm not an expert on the legal issues of that and cities doing that. But something we can certainly look at. We're not proposing to do any of that. And I think that there's probably some regulatory hurdles and hoops that we'd have to jump through in order to make that happen. I just don't know. Not an expert. Yeah, it's a great question. We try not to use public resources and public, dollars and equipment on private projects, private property. I've been in a city where that's happened and I had to put the kibosh on it. So because it's not a fair way of doing that. And how do you pick the winners and losers? And so we don't do that in general. Yeah, Nancy.
Can I go back a project?
You can.
That was bad. The paving on Holman, and so will all of that run down in front of the high school?
So that'll run just north of the railroad tracks up to Ash Street.
Okay, so we've had issues, a concern with access for wheelchairs into the front. I know that Gary worked on some things. So will that be part of that project?
Yeah, so that won't be part of the street paving, but it'll be the 88 ramps that'll be improved. That'll all be done at the same time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Question about capital outlay. Looking at these numbers, I'm guessing that the Signal Evans and Ellendale is not represented here. Where is it?
That's under system development charges and grants.
Okay.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. So the state, we got a grant from the State Department of Transportation for about $2 million for that project. And then the balance of that project will be paid out of development agreements, which we have with some developers contributing some private dollars to that. And then any leftovers, if there is any, will be paid out of street SDCs.
Some of those development dollars coming from the work that's going on to the west of there?
Yes.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
Could you briefly describe how the city advocates for roads not owned by it, i.e. The highway going through town for repairs? How do you advocate to the state? Do you?
Often.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say often. Rich
Can we fix the streets and then build the
Rich is smiling
state?
here, I know, because he's the roadmaster of Benton County to sell them out.
But just briefly,
it's a struggle. ODOT is struggling. You're reading it in the Oregonian, in the Statesman. They have a huge shortfall. then they're trying to figure out how to pay for that right now. Expect your gas to get more expensive, expect licensing fees to be more expensive, because I think that's the way the legislature is going to go, if I'm crystal ball momenting here for a second, instead of cutting, which is what I think they should do. But no one listens to me there at the state. So, but we have reached out to the state, ODOT, on several occasions. They came through a few years ago and kind of did what they call tiger stripes on your road on Washington Street in some of Fairview. They sent their C crew out, not their A crew. It was really bad work. And I don't know if it made it better or worse, but it definitely, you're now driving up instead of down. But there's still areas where they didn't finish, right? And it was just terrible.
And there's gaps right in the middle.
Yeah, and there's gaps in the middle. It's terrible. Yeah, you kind of get what you ask for sometimes, I guess. I don't know. But we talk to ODOT a lot, and we say, hey, we need help here with this. They have a whole maintenance division versus a new project division. So the signal on Ellendale and Furvilla, for example, that's a whole different department, segment of their department than maintenance of a street surface. So you have to know who you need to talk to first. And that is a challenge sometimes. And then catching them on the right day is beneficial. If you have connections, that's beneficial. So I would say that we make a lot of contact with ODOT. There's a lot of good things that ODOT has done for the city. It's not all bad stuff, but the bad stuff is bad and the good stuff can be good. But it's those connections are important. We do a lot of advocacy with ODOT. Yeah.
Sorry to piggyback off that real quick. So I live over on Clay, not the side that had all the work done, but the other side. So on Clay and Ellis, there are two huge potholes as soon as you turn off Washington onto Ellis, and you have to drive kind of over on the left side when you turn. And someone did the saddest patch job I've ever seen. It's still like when you drive through it. Is that part of what was the point? I just feel like some of those patches and repairs are just like, what was the point?
Yeah, let's talk after the meeting a little bit more details, just so I can understand exactly maybe who did that patchwork. I mean, it could have been the city, at some point. Sometimes we'll go through and do some cold patches where you have a big hole, just to kind of fill it in temporarily, knowing that maybe there's a project coming up. With our contractual overlays, we're doing some additional work. It's just not Holman. Howell Street, which is a few blocks away, is getting some work done. We have targeted areas. We've paved over 10 miles of Dallas city streets in the last few years, which is awesome. Right?
Outside of Clay that I'm on too is now getting pretty rough and old over in that whole section over there too. So, which is near Holman.
Yeah, later I'm going to talk about a water line project, which has come down Clay Street west of Fairview. We're now coming down Ash Street on the east side of Fairview coming down. That road's also in not in great shape, and so there's just going to be some resurfacing that'll take place there. Yeah, so there's, we try to capture pieces as we can. I had a citizen who came and said, hey, when you guys, resurface a lot of streets, you missed my street this year. Are you going to come back next year? And thinking we repave the whole city every year. I wish. There is some, maybe some good news coming out of the legislature with all those increase in taxes, with the gas tax and stuff like that. Right now in the bill that's moving forward, we can expect to see like a 70% increase in the revenues that we get from the state shared funding, which would be significant for Dallas. And so that would enable us to do more streets, resurface work if that came through. So stinks you have to pay for more, but at least they're recognizing that cities and counties need more of the state money that's coming in to be able to do the work locally. So that's the silver lining, I would say, in those additional taxes that are being proposed, if there is one. All right, let's jump off the street fund. That was a good discussion, into building inspections. And so building inspections is a fund that any money that we receive in revenues has to be spent on building inspections. It can't be spent on anything else other than a small transfer to the general fund and some other transfers that we make. But you can't take your building inspection fees and buy a fire truck or a police vehicle or a sewer truck. Permit revenues are proposed to increase a little bit. We're seeing continued building activity. It's been, kind of steady for several years. Little less than $1 million to, more than $600,000 is what we've been seeing. So we're right in line with that. Overall, we have a really healthy beginning fund balance, which you want to have, and you want to have strong contingencies because not every year you build things, right? We have recessions, and when we have those, we want to be able to keep our employees and not have to lose them. So we don't build up a massive department while we're busy and then shrink down when we're not busy. We try to keep it manageable in the busy times and the not so busy times. So that's what this budget really reflects. On the expense side, the operating contingencies is just under $2 million. Overall personnel is going up a little bit. Materials and services is going up a little bit. And your capital, we don't have any capital this year. Transfers, overall, slight increase. Transfer to the general fund went up a little bit. We recalculated that formula a little bit to get a little bit more money in the general fund. But overall, pretty stable budget and fund. Any questions on building services? All right. No questions. All right. Police officer and firefighter EMS fee fund. So this is a fund that's going to be obsolete because when the city council repealed the former police officer and firefighter EMS fee, they instead, the new fee that was replaced, that revenue goes directly into the general fund and supports the police and fire and EMS department's personnel services lines. And so this fund is no longer needed to track that. It's now tracked in other places in the budget. So this fund is just going to go away. Any questions on that? All right. System development fund revenues. So again, we're being more conservative in our estimates on revenues. So each of those are going down. But overall, we have healthy beginning fund balances in each of these funds. Total SDC revenues is just under $17 million, which is a little bit decreased because we're doing more SDC eligible projects over the last few years, but still really healthy part of our budget. Any questions on that?
Yes.
Yes.
So one of the major complaints I hear from people is that we don't want more people to move here. Our infrastructure can't support it. But from what I can tell, it looks like we are getting enough in fees and we can support the growth.
Yes. So thank you for asking that question. I'd like to talk about that kind of misunderstanding in the community. We collect money from developers who come in to develop to accommodate for the infrastructure needs and demand on our infrastructure. And it takes time to build infrastructure because you have to make sure you're planning appropriately, right? We don't want to go throw a 6-inch pipe in a road and find out 2 years later it should have been a 12-inch pipe. So it requires, some engineering work and some time to build out that. And then, the construction of that also takes some time. We're doing some major infrastructure work this year. Some of it's going on right now. We have a major sewer line that's going to go up Hawthorne Avenue in county right-of-way up to Ellendale and then over west towards Loch Riel. That project has been 3 to 4 years in the making, but it's going to be when it's all said and done probably a $4 or $5, $6 million project, infrastructure project, and that's going to serve a lot of even future growth and accommodate what we're planning. We're doing some transportation projects, both the signalization at Levens and Ellendale. So going from the three-way stop to a signal will be great. Although my neighbor is challenging me on that, and I have great conversations over the fence. But we're also looking at other intersections and new streets in the future that might be better connection points and be able to move people through the community better. Our parks, we're looking at finishing John Barnard Park this summer. That's a new 2-acre park in our community. There's opportunities for future parkland and development. Lone Oak Park is getting built, others, and so those are SDC parks projects. Our stormwater system, we're looking at projects there. We're looking at doing a project. It's not in the SDCs, but it's out of the stormwater fund because it's a maintenance project to replace a culvert over off of Hunter Street that's undersized at this point, right? As the community's grown, it's needed more capacity. So, we're always working on infrastructure projects to make it better, and developers pay their fair share for those projects and that growth.
Very good one is back on the street fund expenditures when I stepped out of the room. Tony didn't say that you talked about it, but the Barbary Node Reserve is specifically for the Fervilla intersection, and that's paid by that developer, and that's already at $370,000. So, yes.
It's in the building inspections fee. That's where that money is collected and kept, or is it? Oh, it's in the streets. Sorry, it's in the streets. You're right. So that's being collected there. That's great. All right. Anything else on SDCs? All right, perfect. So that's the revenues. On the expenditures, we budget as if we're going to spend every dollar and every penny. We never do. But we just have the authorization. We build it that way so that we make sure that if we have a project that costs a little bit more money, we have the authorization to do it, right? So we're not having to come in and do a bunch of amendments. But we have a lot of projects that are eligible for SDC funding this year. I'm just going to list those really fast, and hopefully it's intuitive on which SDC funds are coming out of. So ADA ramps is SDC eligible where we don't have ADA ramps today. Levens and Allendale Signal, Furvilla, and Allendale Signal, we're doing some design work on that, hopefully this year with ODOT. Godsey Road Phase 1 project is using some SDC funds. John Barnard Park is wrapping up. The Rickrell Creek Trail System, the Kingsborough section is being designed using SDC funds. James Howe Road Water Tank design is using SDC funds. The Water Master Plan is being updated, which is SDC eligible, so we're using some funds for that. The Raw Water Expansion Project at Mercer Reservoir is doing some design and permitting work, so we use SDC funds for that. We're updating our Sewer Master Plan. We're using SDC funds for that. We're also doing the Lock Rail Sewer Line Phase 1 project and some Phase 2 design work. We're using SDC funds for that. And then also the Godsey Road Phase 1 is using some stormwater SDCs. So those are the SDC eligible projects that we're spending money on this year. Any questions on SDC expenses? All right, excellent. Let's jump into the trust funds. So we have several trusts. This is money that's donated to the city but for a specific purpose. So for example, we have a few different fire trust funds. We have the Harpy Bovard Scholarship Fund. The Fire Extrication Team has a trust fund. The Volunteer Fire Appreciation has a trust fund. And then there's an other fire trust fund. The Economic Development Fund is in the city code that we have that, but we don't put any money in it, but we keep it in there because it's in the code. We have a park trust, library trust, the Arboretum Trust, the Friends of the Dallas Aquatic Center Trust. I believe Councilor Shane asked about that earlier. This is where that money comes in. And then miscellaneous donations. If we get someone that just says, hey, I wanted to give $1,000 to the city to be used on something, then that's where that goes. The Shocker Trust, it's obsolete. That was a one-time trust fund that we created to do a code enforcement project, actually, where we became the estate executor for that estate because the person passed away. We cleaned up the property, we sold the property, and so we used some funds for that, but that's going away. Those are really the revenues that we receive. Everything's pretty consistent year over year. As some of the scholarship funds get used, that diminishes over time. Any questions on trust revenues?
I was wondering, with trust funds, like what is the spending priority? Like we go to those first? Do we try to save them in case we need them? Are there rules on how trust things are spent, I guess, based on who donates them?
Yeah, each one's a little bit different. So for example, the Volunteer Fire Appreciation Trust is given to the Volunteer Fire Association, right? So they get a transfer from the general fund to their association, and there's a methodology of how that gets calculated, the amount. And then they use it for their expenses consistent with their budget. So they have kind of their own budget, and they use that as an association. The Harpy Bovard Scholarship Trust is a scholarship that's given for that use, and so those funds are decided and spent on if there's a person that needs that scholarship funding. The Arboretum Trust, there's an Arboretum board. And, we have some money that is kept in there. We get some revenue, and then there's expenses that they make. Their newsletter that they publish, there's some expenses with that. There's, if they bought, some plants or some other things that they want to do. Bark mulch that gets delivered, they pay for those things. So usually there's other boards or people that will make those decisions on expenses, and we just reimburse those expenses. Generally, it's reimbursement. Sometimes we'll pay for them, up front. Friends of the Dallas Aquatic Center, Ann Hurd, the president, comes in every council meeting and reports on the good things they're doing, both fundraising and spending. And that's just a cooperative agreement between the Aquatic Center staff and the Friends on what's needed. But they make decisions on, hey, we want to give our money for that purpose, right? They most recently helped replace some pumps and some boiler room stuff. And so it's great. So that's how that works. Yeah. So if nothing on the trust revenues, I kind of talked about the expenditures. Again, that's how it's spent. And these are the proposed expenditures. Generally, all of the funding is expensed. We make it available so it can be spent. Any questions on trust expenditures? All right, seeing none, it is 8 o'clock. I tend to budget 2 hours for this meeting. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8 more funds to get through. Do you want to power through? You want to come back on Wednesday?
Finish.
Power through. All right, here we go. All right,
You really want to see
grant
your
funds.
faces again?
And just remember, we're all here as long as we want to talk to each other. So, all right, I'll keep it short. Grant funds. This is an area where we have to have a motion later today. Because in the Public Works grant funds, there are 2 grants that are not included. One we received an award for, and the other we have applied, or we will apply and expect to get an award. And so later today, we'll want to make a motion, and I think Holly has the motions, and I added this in here. So under Public Works, we will include an OEM, an Office of Emergency Management grant for $5,000. The grant's actually for more than that. I think we got $50,000 awarded, somewhere in that range. But the $5,000 will be the placeholder. We'll make a budget amendment once we actually get the award in the contract and whatever. The other one is for the Energy Trust of Oregon. We're going to apply for a grant for some work at the wastewater treatment facility for an aerator drive replacement. We budgeted some funds for that out of the sewer fund, but we also are going to apply for a grant to fill the gap for that total project. Those need to be added, both on the revenues and the expenditure side. So there's a motion that's going to come later tonight for that. Other than that, the Public Works includes the $1.4 million for the Safe Routes to School grant. Michael Pierce gets a huge shout out, put a lot of work into that with others in the Public Works Department to get that grant. We're very excited about that. Economic and Community Development has a certified local government grant at $12,650. The John Barnard Park has kind of carryover of $400,000 for their grant award. There's some other grants that we received that are in here. If it's more than $5,000, it's an award that has been received already. If it's a $5,000 number, that's a grant that we're applying for. It's just as a reminder. Any questions on the grant revenues?
Is the ODOT grant the one that's paying for all the ADA ramps, or is that something different?
That ODOT Safe Routes to School grant is for the signalization and the reconstruction of the intersection at Levens and Ellendale. That will take place this summer. Yep, we're excited about that. I know, you live up in that area too. It's great. All right, grant fund expenditures are just spending what is expected on the revenue side. Again, if it's a $5,000 amount, that's a placeholder in case we get the grant. We don't want to put like how much we're actually applying for and how much we want to spend, because that just inflates your budget. You might not get the grant, and then if we don't get the grant, why did we authorize, $500,000 when we didn't get it? So, all right, any questions on grant fund expenditures? All right, let's check that off. General long-term debt. So this is the PERS pension obligation bond. There's a couple years left of this debt. The funds who have employees contribute on the revenue side, and then the one expenditure you see there is the debt service, both principal and interest, for a total debt service payment of $192,000 and change this year. Any questions on long-term debt? All right. Fleet Management Fund. So you'll see that we get revenues. This is an area where we do enterprise out, not to the private market, but to the public market. We have contracts with several other agencies that bring their fleet into our shops, and we provide those services for them. And so the reimbursed services is that money there. This last year we budgeted $160,000. That was a little bit ambitious. We didn't make that number, so we're dropping that down to $120,000 this year. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, as we're building the new Public Works building, including the new shops, we're in kind of a temporary location. So we're probably not able to do as much work as we would like to do. So we're reducing it a little bit there. Also, we're short-staffed right now. Our fleet maintenance, our fleet management supervisor had to retire early. And then we just lost another employee recently, and so we're down to one mechanic. hard, and he works super hard. We're very happy to have him, and we're working on getting that built back up from a staffing perspective. So the reduction in the expenditure side, you'll notice for personnel services, is because instead of having 3 mechanics, we're going to 2 for the time being until we get our new facilities built. We might staff up in the future. But so you'll see that on the revenue side as it being a little bit less because we don't think we're going to be able to do as much work.
What do PW and GF stand for?
Public Works General Fund. Yeah. So we also receive Fleet Services Total Care Program. So that's contributions that come from Public Works, General Fund, and Building. So any of our departments that have fleet vehicles, we pay money to the Fleet Management Fund to support those mechanics and the work that they do. And then there's some, sale of equipment and finance proceeds. The Fleet Department is also paying their fair share of the financing of the Public Works Building project. Any questions on Fleet Management Fund? On the expense side, expenses are kind of following the story I told on the revenues. Not a lot to say there, other than it's a tight year. We need to make sure we're continuing to support that. Going to 2 mechanics, I think, is the right move in the interim until we get the new facility built. All right, on to sewer fund. So sewer fund revenues, we're budgeting just a flat, carry forward from last year to this year on the sale of, or on the sewer charges and the miscellaneous revenues. We are increasing interest on investments because our sewer fund is healthy and there's a lot of money in there, so we're making some good money on interest. And then the finance proceeds, that's the share of the sewer funds portion for the Public Works building. Any questions on the sewer fund? You'll notice.
Expect the Public Works building to be finished this year?
Yes. This calendar year, fiscal year for sure, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, maybe a couple months into the next calendar year. You'll notice the beginning fund balance is about a little over $4.5 million. It's growing, incrementally. Again, it's a healthy fund. On the expenditure side, personnel services is going up a little bit. Materials and services going up, a little less than $100,000. The capital outlay, the sewer fund is paying their portion for the vac truck, the forklift, as well as a pickup for just the staff. We're replacing 1 pickup truck this year. The CMOM program is the I&I, the inflow and infiltration. We do sewer repair work to make sure we don't get leaks into the sewer piping collection system. The wastewater treatment capital improvements, so at the plant, we're doing some work there. That's the aerator, actually down below the wastewater equipment replacement is the aerator drive replacement that I talked about for the Energy Trust of Oregon grant. That's the share that's coming out of the sewer fund, the $237,000. Public Works building, 1.17 includes the proceeds plus the cash that the sewer fund is putting into it. And then we have some sewer projects, just as there's need for pipe replacement and repair. That's the $300,000 under the capital. There are some transfers that come out of the sewer fund to the general fund, the risk management fund, and the long-term debt. And then the sewer debt service, again, it's not $620,000, it's $62,000. And then the other debts that are paid out of there. Any questions on the sewer fund expenditures? All right, excellent. You'll notice the contingencies is growing from $3.3 to $3.8 million this year. So again, a sign that you have a healthy fund. All right, let's go to stormwater, page 86. Stormwater revenues. So we charge, I believe it's a $14 fee on the monthly city bill for stormwater. Is it 14? Is it 16 now? Did it go up by 2? 16. My wife pays the bills. I don't know. $16 is what it's charged now, and that brings in about $1.5 million a year. That's very good because we have some major stormwater projects on the horizon. We're looking at the mill site, the former mill site, of relocating Ash Creek and accommodating the flood capacity there. That will be a combination of some stormwater funds. That will pay the debt service for that project. It's like a $30 million project. It's very expensive, as well as with some stormwater SDCs that'll go towards that as well. So it's good to have a fund that's growing that can sustain that. There are a lot of other stormwater projects for improvements in the city to make sure we're conveying stormwater appropriately. As our community grows, you have more stormwater that needs to be conveyed. And so having a healthy fund is important. I do not anticipate us having to increase that fee this coming year because we're at the end of our planned increases for that fund. All right, on the stormwater expenses side, you'll see we do have some personnel services that are paid out of stormwater. Those increased a bit this year. We put a little bit more of the split of our public works employees into stormwater this year, so that's why it's up a little bit higher than it has been in years past. On the materials and services side, decrease overall. The decrease really comes from professional services. The stormwater project that I talked about on the mill site, a lot of that work has been completed, which is why you're seeing a reduction of $30,000 in that line. That's what drives that cost down overall. Other lines are going up, but not really significantly, a few $1,000s here and there. Under capital outlay, equipment is $201,000. That's the share of the vac truck, the pickup truck, and the forklift. And then the street improvements, culverts, that's the Hunter Street project. I talked about that earlier. That's just for the design work, $50,000. There are some transfers and some debt services that are being paid. The operating contingencies is around $3.5 million. Again, that's going to be needed for the future stormwater projects in our community. Any questions on stormwater? All right, we're getting to the end. Our water fund. So our revenue, we're keeping it relatively flat at just over $5 million. New account fees is remaining the same. Our service connections, we're proposing that to be a little bit less, just because we're not expecting as many houses to be built, over the next few years, over this next year as we have in the past few years. Miscellaneous revenue is going up a little bit. Interest is going up a little bit again because it's a healthy fund. Finance proceeds, that's the share of so that's the share of the Public Works building and other finance projects. I'll talk about that when we get to the expenses, but we're financing a little over $4 million this year in the water fund. Our total revenues are much more than they have been in the past. A lot of that is due to the finance proceeds. We also have a healthy beginning fund balance of around $6 million. That $2 million increase deals with a lot of factors. One of the main factors, though, in that increase is the reserve line that we have for the Mercer Dam project. We're planning to hope, we've done some significant rate increases the last 3 years, and we're putting all that money from those increases into a reserve line. We're getting roughly about $1.5 million. We hope that to grow to about $2 million over time, and that'll be used for future debt service of that project when it gets built. All right, on the expenses side, I'll really kind of focus mostly on the capital and the debt service, just so you can see where we're doing some projects. But under the equipment, that's the vac truck, the pickup truck, and the forklift. The pump station rehabilitation, we're doing some work at the pump station houses for the Clay Street and the Bridlewood pump stations. The Clay Street line rehabilitation is $3.1 million. We're debt servicing that from the state of Oregon through a loan with Business Oregon. That is the phase of the project. We've already done phase one, which was from the Clay Street storage tanks down to Fairview, not Fairhaven, I live next to Fairhaven, Fairview Boulevard, or Fairview Avenue. And then we're now doing the portion from Fairview down to Main Street. And that's going to be located in Ash Street, not Clay Street. But that's a big project that's being done by contract. And then you'll also see some water treatment capital improvements at $1 million. That's a big increase. There's a soda ash lift. Right now, soda ash is one of the chemicals we put in our water to do some disinfection and treatment of the water. Right now, we need a lift to move the material because it's heavy and we're doing that manually. So that's a small portion of that. The larger portion is the filter beds in our filters. We have 4 filters at the water treatment plant. And the media is the same media that was put in there originally many years ago, which is great, right? And the technology hasn't changed a whole lot to treat water. But our engineers have said, there have been some advancements, and if we change the strata of the media, we can increase the efficiency of the plant, 25 to 40%. That's
Which will delay the need to add those other 2.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to delay the need to add additional filters and do it at a much cheaper cost than adding new filters, because we add new filters and a basin to hold that. That's a $10 million project. This project is less than $1 million, and so we're going to do that. It's going to be great. And so that's what that's reflective of there. You have the Public Works Building project at $1.1 million. And then also the Douglas Street Waterline Replacement Project. We're proud of this project because our initial engineer estimate we thought was going to be around $1 million. It came in at bidding under $500,000. We're budgeting $500,000 for some change orders, but the contract award that we gave was less than that. It's a little over $400,000. So we're excited about that. That project is going to be completed as well out of the water fund. Our debt services, all the existing debts that we have. Some of the debts are still unknown. For example, the Ash Street Waterline project, Ash and Clay Street Waterline project. We don't have the debt service for that yet. The Clay Street Cover project, we don't have the debt service for that yet. Because again, the state has given us the money, but they haven't sold off the bonds to know how much they're actually going to charge us. So we're kind of waiting on that. So while this fund is healthy today, and we expect it to be healthy in the future, we are going to have to look at this fund closely. I do expect that we will have a rate increase on this fund as we have in years past. It'll probably be closer to what it has been in the past and not the last 3 years, but going back 4 or 5 years, probably between a 3 and a 5% increase on this fund, just to make sure we're keeping pace with all the projects that we have as we move forward. Any questions on the water fund? All right. So that's normally where we end, but this year we added a couple funds. So general obligation fund revenues and expenditures. So this fund is only necessary if the police station bond passes. So let's skip over this page and go to the next page, which is just on the back side, the police station capital fund. So here is the $17.2 million. So if the bond passes, this page will stay. If it fails, we're going to remove this page before the council adopts the budget. This page, page 94, is where the bond proceeds from selling the money would land and where we would spend the money out of. All right, now flip back the page to page 93. This is the taxes that we would collect and the debt service that we would pay to pay off that bond amount, right? So we're budgeting $800,000 in taxes. That's an estimate. And we wouldn't have a debt service payment in this fiscal year, which is why the proceeds go into unappropriated fund balance. We would make debt service payments starting next fiscal year. But again, we would receive money this year, so we put it in an unappropriated fund balance. Any questions on this? Again, this only stays in the budget. We'll approve it tonight as if it's going to pass. And if it doesn't pass, then we'll take it out in the budget that we give to the council for adoption. That's it. We're ready for motions, unless there's more discussion.
Yeah. Are there any motions for amendments to the budget as presented? Yes.
I move to amend the grant revenue and expenditure funds to include a Public Works OEM and ETO grant line in the amount of $5,000 each.
Second.
Are we allowed to discuss this? Okay, and this is related to the EV chargers?
It's not.
No, okay.
So this
is
is
different.
the two grants that Public Works, one of them has been awarded. That is the OEM grant.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
But we're
that's on here.
budgeting $5,000 because the contract has not yet been signed, so we don't know the exact precise amount to the penny. And so that will be amended later. And then the Energy Trust of Oregon grant, the ETO grant, is for the aerator drive replacement at the wastewater treatment plant. So we're applying for a grant for that. So again, $5,000 because we don't know what it is. And the motion is both for the revenues and expenditures to have $5,000 for each of those grants.
So this is the same as number one on here? Yep. Okay. And so we have you motioned, you second, David second, and all,
Discussion.
any other discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Yes.
Now we'll see if I can get this one right. As we
Been
talked
thinking about it all night.
Yes. I move to amend on page 57, the facility maintenance expenditures, capital outlay, building improvements, to decrease the line item from $90,000 to 35,000 and remove the capital improvement plan on page 23 FA 021 and zero it out from 55,000 to 0.
It's the one with the EV charges?
This is the EV charging.
This is the EV chargers.
This is it.
Okay, so we're wanting to not like fix them?
Ask if there's a second.
Oh, is there a second? Okay.
Now ask. for
Now we
discussion.
can talk about it. I wanted to talk about it. As a representative of the visitors committee, I know that our job is to try to get visitors to come to town. And if we have working EV chargers, that might help that situation.
Reason that I made the motion before, and we've had some other discussion, isn't to not fix them. It's, we don't believe that the citizens, it should be coming out of the general fund.
Oh, okay.
We believe that the EV charger should be providing the funding for that themselves.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
so
point. Okay.
it is a belief that, as a counselor, that I believe that we should review this in our fee schedule, and it'll be brought back up to city council where we'll be talking about the rates what we are charging.
Okay, yeah. And I'd be interested to see what the aquatic center, how they keep up theirs. So, okay,
Because
that
that
makes
was
sense.
part of, that's also included in that EV
Yeah, the
upgrade.
EV charging project includes all of our EV charging stations in the
Oh,
city.
it includes all of it.
So this
Okay,
applies to everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
the four behind City Hall and the ones at the Aquatic Center.
okay.
Is there any data that those machines provide on how much they're used?
Yeah,
Do
so
we have
we
any
have-
data about like how, do we have people inside the city use them, or is it people outside of the city? We have that kind of data? Or is there any way, I don't know, there's a way to get that
I've
kind of
not
data.
drilled down into the data that far. I mean, I would guess that there's probably a way to get that from the company based on, the people that are,
code on the
are using it have zip
credit
codes and stuff
card.
like that. So we
Yeah.
could probably ascertain that. I would say though that, the city does have at least one EV vehicle. It's a hybrid. And that gets charged. I know city staff, city staff members have EV vehicles, and they've used those charging stations. Members of the public use that. The ones here at City Hall are located behind my office, out my window, and so I will look pretty frequently, and they get used every day. Not all day, every day, but there's people, there, I would say on a regular basis. What the total, volume of usage is, I don't have that at my fingertips.
So we could get that
But you
data
can-
to
you can
see
get that
what
data.
kind of fee
Yep.
structure would need to be within a
Yes.
year to get the money.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Just to clarify, this is just a way to get it before city council so that we can have more discussion on this topic.
Basic
Instead of
idea,
just-
basic idea is they should pay for themselves,
Yeah, that
Or
makes
close.
sense.
or as close as we can get. Yeah.
So if they can't, would the plan be to then repropose it back into the budget? Or would it be like, figure that out next year, or?
It could be something that could be, revisited mid-year. I mean, all of them, to my knowledge, are functioning. Some have quirks, is my understanding. And so, as the council looks at their fee schedule starting in June of this year, we'll pull some reports and have some good data to share with them. I'm hoping we can get that by June. And then we can, hopefully build a fee schedule that will make sense so we can start collecting that revenue to cover those operating costs and some maintenance costs. It would not, but, in the event that, let's say, we had a charging station, die mid-year this year, and we, didn't have the funds from the revenues that we received, with the fee increase, the council would have to make the decision, do we let that one, lay fallow until we do get the funding, or do we, amend the budget, to pay for that? So that's a.
Just be an appropriation, correct? Yeah. And because the money's still in the budget, it's just an unappropriated, I believe. Is that right, correct, Cecilia? Yeah. That's what, by removing it from the capital improvements program, it just puts it back.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was running around trying to make sure.
Because you got the 55,000 is not going away. It just goes into the unappropriated fund balance. Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next one. So we are moving to approve the recommended city council sorry, let me read this. I move to,
Just read number 8.
Number 8. Okay, sorry. Thanks, guys. Okay, I call for a motion to approve and recommend the council adopt the 2025-2026 budget as presented and amended the budgeting committee and approve the use of the state revenue sharing funds. Okay,
I move to approve and recommend the council adopt the 2025-26 budget as presented and amended by the Budget Committee and approve the use of state revenue sharing funds.
Second.
all in favor?
So before we say that, can I comment on that?
Yes. Comment, sorry.
All right. So I just want to make it clear again that the presented budget included the changes that were made in this document. So just to be clear that it's not what was in your binder, but it was what was in your binder plus the general fund, the all fund, and the general fund summary pages that were included here. Plus
That's exactly
the other
what I
changes.
meant.
So
It's in
I
my
know that's what you
binder.
meant. I just wanted to clarify.
It's in my binder now
Since we
because
said
I
that at the
replaced all
beginning of
the
the meeting, I
pages.
wanted to make sure it was stated during the motion portion as well.
Want to change their vote? No, just, do I need to say anything else? We're good. Okay. So we have one last,
You need to vote on that. Yeah. I kind of cut off the vote. Yeah. Let's make sure everyone voted.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Then we have one more motion.
Sure. I move to recommend to the city council to approve the property tax rate of 4.1954 per 1,000 of assessed value.
Second.
All in favor? Or do we need to discuss it?
Technically discussed.
Sorry, okay, discuss, sorry.
Ask the question.
Does that just raise it from, it just,
It's exactly what it was. It's not a raise. That is our permanent rate for the city of Dallas. Yeah. Yeah, if you don't approve that rate, then we don't collect property taxes, and then we have to revisit the entire budget.
Pressure.
No pressure, no pressure. That is the city's permanent rate. So you're basically saying that you're recommending that the council tax its citizens, its allowed permanent rate, and so that way we can collect property taxes.
Any other discussion? Okay, we move to all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I think that's it. Next meeting will be next year. So we close the meeting.
Congratulations, Budget Committee. Thank you.
Yeah, adjourn the meeting. Thank you.